So come on up, Billy, and I know there's already one question over here.
I think mine's I just want to know the difference between supportive housing and low-income housing.
The difference between supportive housing and, say, affordable housing, right? Affordable housing, it would be housing that is kind of below market rate affordable. So there's like market rate affordable, and then affordable housing, which is basically if you could spend about 30% of your income that's coming in on housing, that's around kind of affordable housing. Now, that's a very general term. Supportive housing is specifically, so if, like I mentioned, there's over 57,000 people experiencing homelessness. 1/3 of that total population, roughly around 17,000, are folks that we say are chronically homeless. They've been on the streets for about a year or have had 3 to 4 episodes over the last 3 to 4 years. That's the HUD definition, right? For that 17,000, we need to build supportive housing for that population. So chronically homeless could be typically folks with physical, mental, emotional, disabling conditions, addiction issues. The folks that are probably even costing us in public services, the emergency visits, in and out of jail, that's kind of a huge cost. What we find with supportive housing is that we actually save about 43% of that total dollar when folks are in housing with case management, with support, with therapy inside the actual building. So these apartment buildings would be like 49 units, 49 different 500 square units, very small, but there's people there that support. So that's
24 hours.
24 hours.
That's great. Yeah. And low income, affordable housing, it's a little bit of the same thing. And some people, some developers of supportive housing are making mixed, some supportive units with some affordable units. And that way, that company can generate a little bit of income. Sometimes the conception of supportive housing, people think is halfway housing, and where there may be some places like that, the difference that supportive housing and these H and HHH dollars are is that it offers 24-hour management, that the management of the supportive housing is a humongously experienced team of professionals, that they know what they're doing. It's not just any Joe that can sign up to be a supportive housing apartment manager. And so it is complex, but it's also very simple. And it can be for seniors, it can be for vets, it can low income or affordable housing can be specifically for specific groups of people.
So I'll just cut it. I'm preparing a program for the coming school year to present to our group of 1st through 8th graders about addressing homelessness. So we're afraid to call it ending homelessness, like the reasons you discussed, but I'm trying to break down into 3 categories, aspects of homelessness to present over, spread out through the year. So can any of you give me an idea of 3 things that can be done to address homelessness? Supportive housing is an obvious one. Feeding people in need is another one, of course, but that's an aspect of it. So any other aspects that you could see being, I would love to have someone like you or someone like you can see. There's just so much here and it's so timely, so I'm just trying to break it down into that 3.
And this isn't in homelessness, but one thing is talking about homeless prevention. So when you've got people that they're still in their homes and they've got the eviction notice or whatever, there's that which would then prevent homelessness from happening. So that might be an approach.
And having access to food might be one.
Right, and go from there with that one.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to get too kind of age appropriate, right? For
That's
right? So
why
that's pretty heavy.
yeah, we do have to be.
You talk about the solutions that are proven, like interventions that work, supportive housing. There's all these different terminologies, right? You could go as deep as you want, bridge housing, rapid rehousing, but even just the fact of, first to 8th grade, is that correct?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
even,
actually, even younger, I'm sorry.
even younger?
The main presentations for those, we have littler ones too,
Yeah.
who we try to give a short presentation to.
I mean, even kind of the simple messages of homes solve homelessness, right? For some reason, that's a light bulb that goes off in people's minds of like, yes, homes do solve homelessness. So what's the problem with homes? So I like making the connection of our homelessness crisis is our affordability crisis, our housing crisis, kind of going back to like stereotype and bias and myths, is we feel like we're not in a housing crisis because we see a lot of construction cranes everywhere, which is a perception of, well, we have enough homes because they're constantly building. I see buildings everywhere, especially downtown. But that's not always kind of marked for folks who are low income, experiencing homelessness, or folks who are just needing some market rate affordable, right? I could spend $2,200 on a 1-bedroom, but not $3,100. That's crazy. So, I mean, I think talking about affordability, talking about the solutions, and if you want to go into it, again, age appropriate, perhaps talking about some of the drivers, whether that's affordability, mental health, whether that's support services.
One other thing, I know you mentioned the food pantry, but with the very young kids, if you can take them to, I've had first graders and second graders come to the food pantry, stock the shelves, and we do a little walk around and talk and say, hey, we're all the same, here's some of the needs, and you can begin maybe introducing to the younger, not homelessness right off, but say, hey, here's this. So that might be something as well.
Food insecurity.
Yeah.
And I, of course, am obsessed with actionable things,
We want to.
right? And so what can we do?
Right.
And we had letter writing campaigns for our senators and whatnot. So letter writing campaigns for our local city council people, our local leaders, the people that are in the communities, every single area in Los Angeles should be building supportive and low-income housing. So what can they do? Maybe the older ones go to a neighborhood council meeting. Maybe, because it's like if we can get these kids channeled into thinking how they can be engaged and what little actions they can do. I love going to City Hall. I love seeing the way it all works. I feel, like one body and many, but this is things that don't cost anything and that the kids can do.
Yeah, our program is called difference makers, and the whole point of it is to teach kids that they can make a difference.
Right?
Yeah.
And they can make presentations to their families. What is supportive housing? So that so I was at a neighborhood council meeting and I heard two people talking about your question. Well, what is the difference between supportive housing and And I could hear they had misinformation. So politely I said, this is actually what it is. It could be senior or it could be this low income housing. And the older woman elbowed her son and said, see, I told you, right? Because she's a senior and that housing could be for her. But then the son stood up and he was the loudest NIMBY in the room. Do not build that in my neighborhood. Do not. But it was all misinformation. So we can get our children to educate their parents, and
So one last quick one, because Millie joined us up here. Frank was talking about proven things that have worked, but also when you were speaking, you mentioned that there were things that weren't available to you. So I was just wondering, what would be one thing on your wish list that maybe isn't out there or that you think there needs to be more of?
Wow, that's kind of a good question because You know, I think it all just depends, and it fits the need. It has to fit the need of that person. You know, I can't say with somebody that has health issues to go to mental health. You know, so speaking personally, for me, it was mental health because I had a disability in my head. I needed to get all of that straight. So it can go in so many different directions, but it more or less really needs to fit the needs of that particular person.
Can I add that? You know, your story turned when you went to that West Coast mental health facility. What triggered that? What made you go through those doors?
Because I was thinking about killing myself. I just was such in a dark place, and I needed to find out what was wrong with me. The depression was so overwhelming. You know, I just felt that something wasn't right, and the only thing that I knew to do was that I need to talk to somebody about this because I had repressed it for so long. It was hard for me to talk about it. It was hard. I had no earthly understanding on what I was suffering from. So for me, mental health was my answer because everything that I endured came from that dysfunction. The substance abuse, the abusive relationships, all of that stemmed from the dysfunction. So I had to first understand it before I could deal with it. And for me, it was mental health.
Thank you to our panelists one last time.